Is money the root of all evil, or does it change happiness to despair simply by existing? Booth Tarkington, today on the Classic Tales podcast. Welcome to the Classic Tales podcast. Thank you for listening. The vintage episode for the week is Paul's Case by Willa Cather. Be sure to check it out on Tuesday. If you have found value in the show, please consider becoming a monthly supporter. Help us to help other folks like you. Please go to ClassicTalesAudiobooks.com and become a monthly supporter for as little as $5 a month. As a thank you gesture, we'll send you a coupon code every month for $8 off any audiobook order. Give more and you get more. Thanks for helping us out. Go to ClassicTalesAudiobooks.com and become a supporter today. This summer, we are showcasing short stories that have been nominated for the O. Henry Memorial Award from 1919 to 1923. Booth Tarkington won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction twice, once in 1919 for his novel The Magnificent Ambersons, and also in 1923 for Alice Adams. He was well known and prolific, penning many best-selling novels in his time, including Penrod and 17. He was also an illustrator, playwright, and politician, serving one term in 1905 in the Indiana House of Representatives. In the 1910s and 20s, Tarkington was regarded as the most important and lasting writer in his generation. By the end of the 20th century, however, he had been completely ignored by academia, and in 2019, he was described by Robert Gottlieb as America's most distinguished hack. Apparently, Tarkington's penchant for glorifying the past, beyond going beyond typical nostalgia, rubbed the modern academicians the wrong way. I think it's time we give him another chance. And now, The $100 Bill by Booth Tarkington. The new $100 bill, clean and green, freshening the heart with the color of springtime, slid over the glass of the teller's counter and passed under his grill to a fat hand, dingy on the knuckles, but brightened by a flawed diamond. This interesting hand was a part of one of those men who seem to have too much fattened muscle for their clothes. His shoulders distended his overcoat. His calves strained the sprightly checked cloth, a little soiled, of his trousers. His short neck bulged above the glossy collar. His hat, round and black as a pot and appropriately small, he wore slightly obliqued, while under its curled brim his small eyes twinkled surreptitiously between those upper and nether puffs of flesh that mark the too faithful practitioner of unhallowed gaieties. Such was the first individual owner of the new $100 bill, and he at once did what might have been expected of him. Moving away from the teller's grill, he made a cylindrical packet of bills smaller in value, 1s and 5s, then placed round them, as a wrapper, the beautiful $100 bill, snapped a rubber band over it, and the desired inference was plain. A roll all of $100 bills, inside as well as outside. Something more was plain, too. Obviously, the man's small head had a sportive plan in it, for the twinkle between his eye puffs hinted of liquor in the offing, and lively women impressed by a show of masterly riches. Here, in brief, was a man who meant to make a night of it, who would feast, dazzle, compel deference, and be loved. For money gives power, and power is loved. No doubt he would be loved. He was happy. He went out of the bank believing that money is made for joy. So little should we be certain of our happiness in this world. The splendid $100 bill was taken from him untimely, before nightfall that very evening. At the corner of two busy streets he parted with it to the law, though in a mood of excruciating reluctance and only after a cold-blooded threatening on the part of the lawyer. This latter walked away thoughtfully with the $100 bill, not now quite so clean, in his pocket. Collinson was the lawyer's name, and in years he was only 28, but already of the slightly harried appearance that marks the young husband who begins to suspect that the better part of his life was his bachelorhood. His dark, ready-made clothes, his twice-soled shoes, and his hair, which was too long for a neat and businesslike aspect, were symptoms of necessary economy. But he did not wear the eager look of a man who saves to get on for himself. Collinson's look was that of an employed man who only deepens his rut with his pacing of it. An employed man he was indeed, a lawyer without much hope of ever seeing his name on the door or on the letters of the firm that employed him, and his most important work was the collection of small debts. The $100 bill now in his pocket was such a collection, small to the firm and the client, though of a noble size to himself and the long-pursued debtor from whom he had just collected it. The banks were closed, so was the office, for it was 6 o'clock, and Collinson was on his way home when by chance he encountered the debtor. There was nothing to do but keep the bill overnight. There was no hardship, however, as he had a faint pleasure in the unfamiliar experience of walking home with such a thing in his pocket, and he felt a little important by proxy when he thought of it. Upon the city, the November evening had come down dark and moist. Lighted windows and street lamps appeared and disappeared in the altering thickness of fog. But at intervals, as Collinson walked on northward, he passed a small shop, or a cluster of shops, where the light was close to him and bright. And at one of these oases of illumination, he lingered a moment, with a thought to buy a toy in the window for his 3-year-old little girl. The toy was a gaily colored, acrobatic monkey that willingly climbed up and down a string, and he knew that the baby, as he and his wife called their child, would scream with delight at the sight of it. He hesitated, staring into the window rather longingly, and wondered if he ought to make such a purchase. He had $12 of his own in his pocket, but the toy was marked 35 cents, and he decided he could not afford it. So he sighed and went on, turning presently into a darker street. When he reached home, the baby was crying over some inward perplexity not to be explained, and his wife, pretty and a little frowsy, was as usual and as he had expected. That is to say, he found her irritated by cooking, bored by the baby, and puzzled by the dull life she led. Other women, it appeared, had happy and luxurious homes, and during the malnutritious dinner she had prepared, she mentioned many such women by name, laying particular stress upon the achievements of their husbands. Why should she, alone, as she put it, lead the life she did in one room and a kitchenette, without even being able to afford to go to the movies more than once or twice a month? Mrs. Theodore Thompson's husband had bought a perfectly beautiful little sedan automobile. He gave his wife everything she wanted. Mrs. Will Gregory had merely mentioned that her old Hudson seal coat was wearing a little, and her husband had instantly said, "What'll a new one come to, girlie? 400 or 500? Run and get it." Why were other women's husbands like that? And why, oh why, was hers like this? "My goodness," he said. "You talk as if I had sedans and sealskin coats and theater tickets on me. Well, I haven't, that's all." "Then go out and get 'em," she said fiercely. "Go out and get 'em." "What with?" he inquired. "I have $12 in my pocket, and a balance of $17 at the bank. That's 29. I get 25 from the office day after tomorrow, Saturday. That makes 54. But we have to pay 45 for rent on Monday, so that'll leave us $9. Shall I buy you a sedan and a sealskin coat on Tuesday, out of the 9? Mrs. Collinson began to weep a little. "The old story," she said. 6 long, Long years it's been going on now. I ask you how much you've got, and you say $9 or $7 or $4, and once it was 65 cents. 65 cents. That's what we had to live on. 65 cents. Oh, hush, he said wearily. Hadn't you better hush a little yourself? She retorted. You come home with $12 in your pocket and tell your wife to hush? That's nice. Why can't you do what decent men do? What's that? Why, give your wives something to live for. What do you give me, I'd like to know? Look at the clothes I wear, please. Well, it's your own fault, he muttered. What did you say? Did you say it's my fault? I wear clothes any other women I know wouldn't be seen in? Yes, I did. If you hadn't made me get you that platinum ring— What? She cried, and flourished her hand at him across the table. Look at it. It's platinum, yes, but look at the stone in it, about the size of a pinhead, so I'm ashamed to wear it when any of my friends see me. $116 is what this magnificent ring cost you, and how long did I have to beg before I got even that little out of you? And it's the best thing I own, and the only thing I ever did get out of you. Oh, Lordy, he moaned. I wish you'd seen Charlie Loomis looking at this ring today, she said with a desolate laugh. He happened to notice it, and I saw him keep glancing at it, and I wish you'd seen Charlie Loomis's expression. Collinson's own expression became noticeable upon her introduction of this name. He stared at her gravely until he completed the mastication of one of the indigestibles she had set before him. Then he put down his fork and said, So, you saw Charlie Loomis again today? Where? Oh, my, she sighed. Have we got to go over all that again? Over all what? Over all the fuss you made the last time I mentioned Charlie's name. I thought we settled it you were going to be a little more sensible about him. Yes, Collinson returned. I was going to be more sensible about him because you were going to be more sensible about him. Wasn't that the agreement? She gave him a hard glance, tossed her head so that the curls of her bobbed hair fluttered prettily, and with satiric mimicry repeated his question. Agreement. Wasn't that the agreement? Oh my, but you do make me tired, talking about agreements. As if it was a crime, my going to a vaudeville matinee with a man kind enough to notice that my husband never takes me anywhere. Did you go to a vaudeville with him today? No, I didn't, she said. I was talking about the time when you made such a fuss. I didn't go anywhere with him today. I'm glad to hear it, Collinson said. I wouldn't have stood for it. Oh, you wouldn't, she cried, and added a shrill laugh as further comment. You wouldn't have stood for it. Never mind, he returned doggedly. We went over all that the last time, and you understand me. I'll have no more foolishness about Charlie Loomis. How nice of you. He's a friend of yours. You go with him yourself, but your wife mustn't even look at him, just because he happens to be the one man that amuses her a little. That's fine. Never mind, Collinson said again. You said you saw him today. I want to know where. Suppose I don't choose to tell you? You'd better tell me, I think. Do you? I've got to answer for every minute of my day, have I? I want to know where you saw Charlie Loomis. She tossed her curls again and laughed. Isn't it funny? She said. Just because I like a man, he's the one person I can't have anything to do with. Just because he's kind and jolly and amusing, and I like his jokes and his thoughtfulness toward a woman when he's with her, I'm not to be allowed to see him at all. But my husband, oh, that's entirely different. He can go out with Charlie whenever he likes and have a good time, while I stay home and wash the dishes. Oh, it's a lovely life. Where did you see him today? Instead of answering his question, she looked at him plaintively and allowed tears to shine along her lower eyelids. Why do you treat me like this? She asked in a feeble voice. Why can't I have a man friend if I want to? I do like Charlie Loomis. I do like him. Yes, that's what I noticed. Well, but what's the good of always insulting me about him? He has time on his hands of afternoons, and so have I. Our janitor's wife is crazy about the baby and just adores to have me leave her in their flat. The longer the better. Why shouldn't I go to a matinee or a picture show sometimes with Charlie? Why should I just have to sit around instead of going out and having a nice time when he wants me to? I want to know where you saw him today. Mrs. Collinson jumped up. You make me sick, she said, and began to clear away the dishes. I want to know where— Oh, hush up, she cried. He came here to leave a note for you. Oh, said her husband. I beg your pardon. That's different. How sweet of you. Where's the note, please? She took it from her pocket and tossed it to him. So long as it's a note for you, it's all right, of course, she said. I wonder what you'd do if he'd written one to me. Never mind, said Collinson, and read the note. Dear Collie, Dave and Smithy and old Bill and Sammy Hogue and maybe Steiny and Saul are coming over to the shack about 8:30. Home brew and the old pastime, you know. Don't fail. Charlie. You've read this, of course, Collinson said. The envelope wasn't sealed. I have not, his wife returned, covering the prevarication with a cold dignity. I am not in the habit of reading other people's correspondence, thank you. I suppose you think I do so, because you'd never hesitate to read any note I got, but I don't do everything you do, you see. Well, you can read it now, he said, and gave her the note. Her eyes swept the writing briefly, and she made a sound of wonderment, as if amazed to find herself so true a prophet. And the words weren't more than out of my mouth. You can go and have a grand party right in his flat, while your wife stays home and gets the baby to bed and washes the dishes. I'm not going. Oh, no, she said mockingly. I suppose not. I see you missing one of Charlie's stag parties. I'll miss this one. But it was not to Mrs. Collinson's purpose that he should miss the party. She wished him to be as intimate as possible with the debonair Charlie Loomis. And so, after carrying some dishes into the kitchenette in meditative silence, she reappeared with a changed manner. She went to her husband, gave him a shy little pat on the shoulder, and laughed good-naturedly. Of course you'll go, she said. I do think you're silly about my never going out with him when it would give me a little innocent pleasure, and when you're not home to take me yourself, but I wasn't really in such terrible earnest, all I said. You work hard the whole time, honey, and the only pleasure you ever do have is when you get a chance to go to one of these little penny-ante stag parties. You haven't been to one for ever so long, and you never stay after 12. It's really all right with me. I want you to go. Oh, no, said Collinson. It's only penny ante, but I couldn't afford to lose anything at all. If you did lose it, it'd only be a few cents, she said. What's the difference if it gives you a little fun? You'll work all the better if you go out and enjoy yourself once in a while. Well, if you really look at it that way, I'll go. That's right, dear, she said, smiling. Better put on a fresh collar and your other suit, hadn't you? I suppose so, he assented, and began to make the changes she suggested. When he had completed his toilet, it was time for him to go. She came in from the kitchenette, kissed him, and then looked up into his eyes, letting him see a fond and brightly amiable expression. There, honey, she said. Run along and have a nice time. Then maybe you'll be a little more sensible about some of my little pleasures. He held the $100 bill folded in his hand, meaning to leave it with her. But as she spoke, a sudden recurrence of suspicion made him forget his purpose. Look here, he said. I'm not making any bargain with you. You talk as if you thought I was going to let you run around to vaudevilles with Charlie because you let me go to this party. Is that your idea? It was indeed precisely Mrs. Collinson's idea, and she was instantly angered enough to admit it in her retort. "Oh, aren't you mean?" she cried. "I might know better than to look for any fairness in a man like you." "See here." "Oh, hush up," she said. "Shame on you. Go to your party." With that she put both hands upon his breast and pushed him toward the door. "I won't go. I'll stay here." "You will too go," she cried shrewdly. "I don't want to look at you around here all evening. It'll make me sick to look at a man without an ounce of fairness in his whole mean little body." "All right," said Collinson violently. "I will go." "Yes, get out of my sight." And he did, taking the $100 bill with him to the penny ante poker party. The gay Mr. Charlie Loomis called his apartment the Shack, in jocular depreciation of its beauty and luxury. But he regarded it as a perfect thing, and in one way it was, for it was perfectly in the family likeness of 1,000 such shacks. It had a ceiling with false beams, walls of green burlap, spotted with colored coaching prints, brown shelves supporting pewter plates and mugs, mission chairs, a leather couch with violet cushions, silver-framed photographs of lady friends and officer friends, a drop light of pink-shot imitation alabaster, a papier-mâché skull tobacco jar among moving picture magazines on the round card table, and, of course, the final Charlie Loomis touch, a Japanese manservant. The master of all this was one of those neat, stoutish young men with fat, round heads, sleek fair hair, immaculate pale complexions, and infirm little pink mouths. In fact, he was the type that might suggest to the student of resemblances a fastidious and excessively clean white pig with transparent ears. Nevertheless, Charlie Loomis was of a free-handed habit in some matters, being particularly indulgent to pretty women and their children. He spoke of the latter as the kiddies, of course, and liked to call their mothers kiddo or girly. One of his greatest pleasures was to tell a woman that she was the dearest, bravest little girlie in the world. Naturally, he was a welcome guest in many households, and would often bring a really magnificent toy to the child of some friend whose wife he was courting. Moreover, at 33, he had already done well enough in business to take things easily, and he liked to give these little card parties, not for gain, but for pastime. He was cautious and disliked high stakes in a game of chance. "I don't consider it hospitality to have any man go out of my shack sore," he was wont to say. "Myself, I'm a bachelor and got no obligations. I'll shoot any man that can afford it for anything he wants to. Trouble is, you never can tell when a man can't afford it, or what harm his losing might mean to the little girlie at home and the kiddies. No, boys, penny ante and 10-cent limit is the highest we go in this old shack. Penny ante and a few steins of the old home brew that hasn't got a divorce in a barrel of it." Penny ante and the old home brew had been in festal operation for half an hour when the morose Collinson arrived this evening. Mr. Loomis and his guests sat about the round table under the alabaster drop-light. Their coats were off. Cigars were worn at the deliberative poker angle. Colorful chips and cards glistened on the cloth. One of the players wore a green shade over his eyes, and all in all, here was a little poker party for a lithograph. "Old collie, by gosh!" Mr. Loomis shouted humorously. "Here's your vacant chair. Stack all stuck out for you and everything. Sit down, neighbor, and Smithy'll deal you in next hand. What made you so late? Helping the little girlie at home get the kitty to bed? That's a great kitty of yours, Collie." Collinson took the chair that had been left for him, counted his chips, and then as the playing of a hand still preoccupied 3 of the company, he picked up a silver dollar that lay upon the table near him. "What's that?" he asked. "A side bet? Or did somebody just leave it here for me?" "Yes, for you to look at," Mr. Loomis explained. "It's Smithy's." "What's wrong with it?" "Nothing. Smithy was just showing it to us. Look at it." Collinson turned the coin over and saw a tiny inscription that had been lined into the silver with a point of steel. "Luck," he read. "Luck, hurry back to me." Then he spoke to the owner of this marked dollar. "I suppose you put that on there, Smithy, to help make sure of getting our money tonight." But Smithy shook his head, which was a large, gaunt head, as it happened, a head fronted with a sallow face shaped much like a coffin, but inconsistently genial in expression. "No," he said. "It just came in over my counter this afternoon, and I noticed it when I was checking up on the day's cash. Funny, ain't it? Luck, hurry back to me." "Who do you suppose marked that on it?" Collinson said thoughtfully. "Golly," his host exclaimed. "It won't do you much good to wonder about that." Collinson frowned, continuing to stare at the marked dollar. "I guess not. But really, I should like to know." "I would too," Smithy said. "I've been thinking about it. Might have been somebody in Seattle, or somebody in Ipswich, Massachusetts, or New Orleans, or St. Paul. How you going to tell? It's funny how some people like to believe luck depends on some little thing like that." "Yes, it is," Collinson assented, still brooding over the coin. The philosophic Smithy extended his arm across the table, collecting the cards to deal them, for the hand was finished. "Yes, sir, it's funny," he repeated. "Nobody knows exactly what luck is, but the way I guess it out, it lays in a man's believin' he's in luck, and some little object like this makes him kind of concentrate his mind on thinking he's going to be lucky. Because, of course, you often know you're going to win, and then you do win. You don't win when you want to win, or when you need to. You win when you believe you'll win. I don't know who it was that said, 'Money is the root of all evil,' but I guess he didn't have too much sense. I suppose if some man killed some other man for $1, the poor fish that said that would let the man out and send the dollar to the chair." But here this garrulous and discursive guest was interrupted by moderate protests from several of his colleagues. "Cut it out. My lord, do something. Smithy, are you ever going to deal?" "I'm going to shuffle first," he responded, suiting the action to the word, although with deliberation, and at the same time continuing his discourse. "It's a mighty interesting thing, a piece of money. You take this dollar now. Who's it belong to? Where's it been? What different kind of funny things has it been spent for sometimes? What funny kind of secrets do you suppose it could have heard if it had ears? Good people have had it, and bad people have had it. Why, $1 could tell more about the human race. Why, it could tell all about it." "I guess it couldn't tell all about the way you're dealing those cards," said the man with the green shade. "You're mixing things all up." "I'll straighten them all out then," said Smithy cheerfully. "They say money talks. Golly, if it could talk, what couldn't it tell? Nobody'd be safe. I got this dollar now, but who's it going to belong to next? And what'll he do with it? And then after that? Why, for years and years and years, it'll go on from one pocket to another. In a millionaire's house one day, in some burglar's flat the next maybe. And in one person's hand, money'll do good, likely, and in another, it'll do harm. We all want money, but some say it's a bad thing, like that dummy I was talking about. Lordy. Goodness or badness, I'll take all anybody—" He was interrupted again with an increased vehemence. Collinson, who sat next to him, complied with the demand to ante up, then placed the dollar near his little cylinder of chips and looked at his cards. They proved unencouraging, and he turned to his neighbor. "I'd sort of like to have that marked dollar, Smithy," he said. "I'll give you a paper dollar, Smithy," he said. "I'll give you a paper dollar and a nickel for it." But Smithy laughed, shook his head, and slid the coin over toward his own chips. "No, sir, I'm going to keep it. A while, anyway." "So you do think it'll bring you luck after all?" "No, but I'll hold on to it for this evening anyhow." "Not if we clean you out, you won't," said Charlie Loomis. "You know the rules of the old shack. Only cash goes in this game. No IOU stuff ever went here or ever will. Tell you what I'll do, though, before you lose it. I'll give you $1.25 for your old silver dollar, Smithy." "Oh, you want it too, do you? I guess I can spot what sort of luck you want it for, Charlie." "Well, Mr. Bones, what sort of luck do I want it for?" "You win, Smithy," one of the other players said. "We all know what sort of luck old Charlie wants your dollar for. He wants it for luck with the dames." "Well, I might," Charlie admitted, not displeased. "I haven't been so lucky that way lately. Not so doggone lucky." All of his guests except one laughed at this, but Collinson frowned, still staring at the marked dollar. For a reason he could not have put into words just then, it began to seem almost vitally important to him to own this coin if he could, and to prevent Charlie Loomis from getting possession of it. The jibe, "He wants it for luck with the dames," rankled in Collinson's mind. Somehow it seemed to refer to his wife. "I'll tell you what I'll do, Smithy," he said. "I'll bet $2 against that dollar of yours that I hold a higher hand next deal than you do." "Here, here," Charlie remonstrated. "Shack rules, 10-cent limit. That's only for the game," Collinson said, turning upon his host with sudden sharpness. "This is an outside bet between Smithy and me. Will you do it, Smithy? Where's your sporting spirit?" So liberal a proposal at once roused the spirit to which it appealed. "Well, I might if some of the others will come in too, and make it really worth my while." "I'm in," the host responded with prompt inconsistency, and others of the party, it appeared, were desirous of owning the talisman. They laughed and said it was crazy stuff, yet they all came in, and for the first time in the history of this shack, what Loomis called real money was seen upon the table as a stake. It was won, and the silver dollar with it, by the largest and oldest of the gamesters, a fat man with a walrus mustache that inevitably made him known in this circle as Old Bill. He smiled condescendingly and would have put the dollar in his pocket with the real money, but Loomis protested. "Here, what you doing?" he shouted, catching Old Bill by the arm. "Put that dollar back on the table."
"What for?"
"What for? Why, we're going to play for it again. Here's $2 against it. I beat you on the next hand."
"No," said old Billy calmly. "It's worth more than $2 to me. It's worth 5.
"Well, 5 then," his host returned. "I want that dollar." "So do I," said Collinson. "I'll put in $5 if you do."
"Anybody else in?"
Old Bill inquired, dropping the coin on the table, and all of the others again came in. Old Bill won again, but once more Charlie Loomis prevented him from putting the silver dollar in his pocket. "Come on now," Mr. Loomis exclaimed. "Anybody else but me in on this for $5 next time?" "I am," said Collinson, swallowing with a dry throat, and he set forth all that remained to him of his $12. In return, he received a pair of deuces, and the jubilant Charlie won. He was vainglorious in his triumph. "Didn't that little luck piece just keep on trying to find the right man?" he cried, and read the inscription loudly. "Luck, hurry back to me. Right-o. You're home where you belong, girlie. Now we'll settle down to our regular little game again."
"Oh, no," said Old Bill. "You wouldn't let me keep it. Put it out there and play for it again."
"I won't. She's mine now."
"I want my luck piece back myself," said Smithy. "Put it out and play for it. You made Old Bill."
"I won't do it."
"Yes, you will,"
Collinson said, and he spoke without geniality. "You put it out there." "Oh, yes, I will," Mr. Loomis returned mockingly. "I will, for $10.
"Not I," said Old Bill. 5 is foolish enough.
And Smithy agreed with him.
"Nor me."
"All right, then. If you're afraid of 10, I keep it. I thought the 10 would scare you."
"Put that dollar on the table," Collinson said. I'll put 10 against it." There was a little commotion among these mild gamesters, and someone said, "You're crazy, Collie. What do you want to do that for?" "I don't care," said Collinson. "That $1's already cost me enough, and I'm going after it."
"Well, you see, I want it too," Charlie Loomis retorted cheerfully, and he appealed to the others. "I'm not asking him to put up 10 against it, am I?"
"Maybe not," Old Bill assented. "But how long is this thing going to keep on? It's already balled our game all up, and if we keep fooling with these side bets, why, what's the use?"
"My goodness," the host exclaimed. "I'm not pushing this thing, am I? I don't want to risk my good old luck piece, do I? It's Collie that's crazy to go on, ain't it?" He laughed. "He hasn't showed his money yet, though, I notice. And this old shack is run on strictly cash principles. I don't believe he's got $10 more on him."
"Well, yes, I have."
"Let's see it, then." Collinson's nostrils distended a little, but he said nothing, fumbled in his pocket, and then tossed the $100 bill, rather crumpled, upon the table.
"Great heavens!" shouted Old Bill. "Call the doctor! I'm all of a swoon."
"Look at what's spilled over our nice clean table," another said in an awed voice. "Did you claim he didn't have 10 on him, Charlie?"
"Well, it's nice to look at," Smithy observed, "but I'm with Old Bill. How long are you two going to keep this thing going? If Collie wins the luck piece, I suppose Charlie'll bet him 15 against it, and then—"
"No, I won't," Charlie interrupted. "10's the limit."
"Going to keep on betting 10 against it all night?"
"No," said Charlie. "I'll tell you what I'll do with you, Collinson. We both of us seem kind of set on this luck piece, and you're already out some on it. I'll give you a square chance at it, and a catching even. It's 20 minutes after 9. I'll keep on these side bets with you till 10 o'clock. But when my clock hits 10, we're through. And the one that's got it then keeps it, and no more fooling. You want to do that, or quit now? I'm game either way."
"Go ahead and deal," said Collinson. "Whichever one of us has it at 10 o'clock, it's his, and we quit."
But when the little clock on Charlie's green-painted mantel shelf struck 10, the luck piece was Charlie's, and with it an overwhelming lien on the $100 bill. He put both in his pocket. "Remember, this ain't my fault. It was you that insisted," he said, and handed Collinson 4 $5 bills as change. Old Bill, platonically interested, discovered that his cigar was sparkless, applied a match, and casually set forth his opinion.
"Well, I guess that was about as poor a way of spending $80 as I ever saw. But it all goes to show that there's truth in the old motto that anything at all can happen in any poker game. That was a mighty nice $100 bill you had on you, Collie. But it's like what Smithy said. A piece of money goes hopping around from one person to another. I don't care. And yours has gone and hopped to Charlie. The question is, who's it going to hop to next?" He paused to laugh, glanced over the cards that had been dealt him, and concluded. "My guess is some good-looking woman will probably get a fair chunk of that $100 bill out of Charlie. Well, let's settle down to the old army game."
They settled down to it, and by 12 o'clock, the invariable closing hour of these pastimes in the old shack, Collinson had lost $4.30 more. He was commiserated by his fellow gamesters as they put on their coats and overcoats, preparing to leave the hot little rooms. They shook their heads, laughed ruefully in sympathy, and told him he oughtn't to carry $100 bills upon his person when he went out among friends. Old Bill made what is sometimes called an unfortunate remark.
"Don't worry about Collie," he said jocosely. "That $100 bill probably belonged to some rich client of his."
"What?" Collinson said, staring.
"Never mind, Collie. I wasn't in earnest," the joker explained. "Of course, I didn't mean it."
"Well, you oughtn't to say it," Collinson protested. People say a thing like that about a man in a joking way, but other people hear it sometimes and don't know they're joking, and a story gets started.
My goodness, but you're serious, old Bill exclaimed. You look like you had a misery in your chest, as the rubes say, and I don't blame you. Get on out in the fresh night air, and you'll feel better.
He was mistaken, however. The night air failed to improve Collinson's spirits as he walked home alone through the dark and chilly streets. There was indeed a misery in his chest, where stirred a sensation vaguely nauseating. His hands were tremulous, and his knees infirm as he walked. In his mind he was a confusion of pictures and sounds, echoes from Charlie Loomis's shack. He could not clear his mind's eye of the $100 bill, and its likeness, as it lay crumpled on the green cloth under the droplight, haunted and hurt him as a face in a coffin haunts and hurts the new mourner. It seemed to Collinson then that money was the root of all evil and the root of all good, the root and branch of all life indeed. With money, his wife would have been amiable, not needing gay bachelors to take her to vaudevilles. Her need of money was the true foundation of the jealousy that had sent him out morose and reckless tonight, of the jealousy that had made it seem, when he gambled with Charlie Loomis for the luck dollar, as though they really gambled for luck with her. It still seemed to him that they had gambled for luck with her, and Charlie had won it. But as Collinson plodded homeward in the chilly midnight, his shoulders sagging and his head drooping, he began to wonder how he could have risked money that belonged to another man. What on earth had made him do what he had done? Was it the mood his wife had set him in as he went out that evening? No. He had gone out feeling like that often enough, and nothing had happened. Something had brought this trouble on him, he thought. For it appeared to Collinson that he had been an automaton, having nothing to do with his own actions. He must bear the responsibility for them, but he had not willed them. If the $100 bill had not happened to be in his pocket, that was it. And at the thought, he mumbled desolately to himself,
I'd been all right if it hadn't been for that.
If the $100 bill had not happened to be in his pocket, he'd have been all right. The $100 bill had done this to him, and Smithy's romancing again came back to him.
In one person's hands, money'll do good, likely. In another's, it'll do harm.
It was the money that did harm or good, not the person, and the money in his hands had done this harm to himself. He had to deliver $100 at the office in the morning somehow, for he dared not take the risk of the client's meeting the debtor. There was a balance of $17 in his bank, and he could pawn his watch for $25, as he knew well enough by experience. That would leave $58 to be paid, and there was only one way to get it. His wife would have to let him pawn her ring. She'd have to. Without any difficulty, he could guess what she would say and do when he told her of his necessity. And he knew that never in her life would she forego the advantage over him she would gain from it. He knew, too, what stipulations she would make, and he had to face the fact that he was in no position to reject them. The $100 bill had cost him the last vestiges of mastery in his own house, and Charlie Loomis had really won not only the bill and the luck, but the privilege of taking Collinson's wife to vaudevilles. And it all came back to the same conclusion. The $100 bill had done it to him. What kind of a thing is this life? Collinson mumbled to himself, finding matters wholly perplexing in a world made into tragedy at the caprice of a little oblong slip of paper. Then, as he went on his way to wake his wife and face her with the soothing proposal to pawn her ring early the next morning, something happened to Collinson. Of itself, The thing that happened was nothing, but he was aware of his folly, as if it stood upon a mountain-top against the sun. And so he gathered knowledge of himself and a little of the wisdom that is called better than happiness. His way was now the same as upon the latter stretch of his walk home from the office that evening. The smoke fog had cleared, and the air was clean, with a night wind that moved briskly from the west. In all the long street, there was only one window lighted, but it was sharply outlined now, and fell as a bright rhomboid upon the pavement before Collinson. When he came to it, he paused, at the hint of an inward impulse he did not think to trace, and frowning, he perceived that this was the same shop window that had detained him on his homeward way, when he had thought of buying a toy for the baby. The toy was still there in the bright window, the gay little acrobatic monkey that would climb up or down a red string as the string slacked or straightened. But Collinson's eye fixed upon the card marked with the price. 35 cents. He stared and stared. 35 cents, he said to himself. 35 cents! Then suddenly he burst into loud and prolonged laughter. The sound was startling in the quiet night, and roused the interest of a meditative policeman who stood in the darkened doorway of the next shop. He stepped out, not unfriendly. "What you having such a good time over, this hour of the night?" he inquired. "What's all the joke?" Collinson pointed to the window. "It's that monkey on the string," he said. Something about it struck me as mighty funny. So, with a better spirit, he turned away, still laughing, and went home to face his wife. This is B.J. Harrison. I hope you've enjoyed this unabridged production of The $100 Bill by Booth Tarkington. If you've enjoyed this episode, you might also enjoy The Wind in the Rosebush by Mary Wilkins Freeman, available for free in your podcast feed. Thank you for joining me today and allowing classic literature to awaken your better self. Please join me next time, and we'll rediscover the greatest stories ever put to paper.